So it's wavy today, and this is a new scene. We'll first create a plane or a disk, and I choose a disk because I want to give you a warning as well. The ocean simulation thinks in terms of meters, so this is 1 meter, these are 12 meters, and these are 24 by 24 meters, and that's the dimension of your ocean in the ideal way. You can adjust this later, but it's good to start with that. Secondly, you need lots of geometry. When you have such a simple geometry like the default disk, you get waves, all right, but they are not very, you don't get delicate motions right here. So let's go to poly disk and now be very careful. When you raise this subdivisions value from 3 to say 20, Maya probably will freeze. So don't use this slider. Be very careful, because already when I change this from 3 to 5, check out how the resolution changes quite drastically. And I think with 7 we're just all right, maybe 8. Already Maya has to think a little. It depends on your machine, obviously. Okay, so we have a high resolution here, and this is just good style. I think we freeze the transformation so everything is zeroed out, and we delete by type the history, so this disk is just a disk as if it was made like this and not as if it would have been a small one before. Okay, let's deactivate the grid, and now we come to the shader. We need an ocean shader, and for that we can create, for example, an Arnold surface shader, and I want to map the color with an ocean texture, and for that purpose I click on Maya here and type in ocean. I get a choice between 2 of them. The ocean as such is waves but not blue, and the ocean shader is the one we can choose here. It really doesn't matter so much. Now, an important thing to note is when we run the animation now, we get that floating structure, but it's only the texture. The disk is totally flat, and that's obviously not what an ocean is about, but you can use this if you have a big scene and you see the ocean only from quite a distance. So this looks quite impressive already for an ocean, and of course you can change, add the ripples, etc., and foam with the Bifröst fluids. Basically what we're doing now is Bifröst fluids, but we won't actually use Bifröst fluids. It's just indirectly in our scene now. So let's click on this object and then invoke boss. Boss has only 1 entry here, and if you don't find that boss menu entry here under FX, so when you under modeling you don't see it anyway, but when you change this to FX you should see boss. If you don't, go to Windows, Settings, Preferences, and choose the plugin manager. The plugin manager shows you all the plugins which have been loaded, and obviously in your case boss was not loaded, so activate it there. Anyway, it has only 1 menu entry, and we open this now. 2 black spaces here and something about cache, disable cache, replace domain, etc. What we'll do is we create a wave solver, as it's called, and forget about all the icons right here, just concentrate on these 2. These 2 are the ones we're going to use for a big ocean, and that's what's of our main interest now. We use this icon. It's called spectral waves. So with the disk selected, we click here, and now we have something here. We can close this window now, but you already see that the surface is being deformed. I extend the frame range now to 2000, so I get more of the whole simulation. In the attribute editor, on the right side, you see there's a starting frame 2. If you set this to, say, 100, go back to the very beginning, the disk is flat until we reach down here frame 100, and now the simulation starts. So you would usually set this to 1, so it starts from the very beginning. You have a pixel size here, a patch size I mean. If you reduce this to 20 by 20, this is what you get. A much milder simulation. Whereas when you raise this to 400 by 400, you get lots of more detail and much more deformation. I set this back to maybe 150 by 150. Here you have the space scale. This has to do with what I talked about, the 1 meter grid at the beginning. If you increase the scale here, you basically tell Maya that we're working on a huge scale and your ocean is very small. Whereas when you reduce this to 0.3, you get a very detailed simulation. So why not set this to 0.9, which is about the beginning. Here, under frequency spectra type, you have different algorithms which do that random wave behavior. I mean, this is just perfect. It's called TMA. But you can use others. Some are very drastic. And they all have their advantages. Quite like this one, Davidian. Let's go back to TMA. Now the seed is something interesting. It is basically the starting point of the random process. It's set to 1, 2, 3, 4. This doesn't matter, it's just a fun number maybe. You can set it to 999 as well, and the wave behavior won't change, but it will just start the randomness from a different value. So when you mix two waves and you have different seeds, the waves behave differently. So that's good for mixing waves. Now here you have the gravity. Well, guess what's happening if you reduce the gravity to 1? And raise it to 30. So the stronger the gravity, obviously the waves cannot play that much. Let's set this back to 9.8. That's quite a realistic simulation, really. The wave height, I've heard that you shouldn't play with this value very much, although it doesn't hurt. So 1 is just fine. And down here you have wind speed, for example. Guess what's happening when I reduce the wind speed from the default of 4 to 0? No wind, no waves. Everything which moves here is the texture, but not the waves. The disk is flat. And with a very intense wind speed, you have intense and very high waves. That's the storm. Of course, you can animate all these values here. Let me set it back to, say, 5. Next thing, we're going to reselect this, go back to the boss editor, and create another spectral wave. So we have two of them now. They're overlapping, and in order to make them look a little bit more different, let me change a few parameters here. We start at frame 1, like the other one, and we change the patch size to 30 by 30, and we change the seed to 2, and the gravity is fine, and the height, just for demonstration purposes, to 3. Now this is the mixture between two wave random simulations. The animation goes slower now because Maya has to add both of the wave deformers now. Here you have the check box here, which means I can deactivate the second one now, or reactivate it. Actually, I should change the wave height. So I set the wave height to 1 for the second one now. That's why it's, when I solo it, it's such a flat animation, but it's still deforming the surface. Okay, Maya mixes both of them, and this is what they look like. Now I show you the usage of this button here. You just trash it. So Maya performs a little bit better now, and we only have the first spectral wave. What is this about? Well, it is the wave influence. That's for creating boats, which we'll do in a second. What I want to show you as well is cache all. So if you have an animation range here of 2000, the cache will go on until frame 2000. But let me reduce this to 400. So we see a little bit less of the simulation, and now cache them all. So Maya will create a cache from this wave. 400 frames. I'm fast forwarding this now. In future versions of Maya, this will probably be different, but now you have to cache it, and now you can scrub back and forth, and everything is fluent here. So when I replay the animation now, there's no stuttering here. This is real time. Now I want to tell you something about this icon here. This icon is for creating more subtle waves in a more local environment. So this is for the big ocean, which we just used twice actually, and this one is for the small waves. And the small waves are interesting when you move a boat through the ocean. So let's create one. We need to select it and click here. So we have something which is not called a spectral wave now, but a Boss wave solver. So it's that icon here, and we have an ocean depth, etc. All the values which we've seen before, slightly different, I guess. Starting frame we can set to 1. But now we need to add a boat to this solver here. Not to that one, to this one. We want the boat to have local influence on the water, and this is what this thing does. It's not cached, by the way, and we don't need to cache it currently, and we can deactivate the cache right here, because the boat will stir everything up anyway. So let's create a boat just briefly. Boat in 1 minute. So we will lead the boat through the ocean now, and keep in mind that we're not animating the boat on top of the waves. We just want to see the influence of the boat in the waves. How do we do this? We go back to Boss. We select the boat and click here. If we click here, Maya asks us to input an EXR file. For example, to create water drops, you would just create flat images, I mean pictures, with black and white contrast, and everywhere where the black or the white points are will be raindrops on that surface. But we'll create a geoconnector, as it's called, and we're done. In the attribute editor we have one very important value, which is the amplitude. And we raise this straight away to say 12 in order to see the effect. And when I now animate the boat to drive through that water, the waves have lots of things to do to adapt to it. I can do this interactively by deleting the channels, meaning the animation, and then I click on this icon. It's under Effects, and it's the real-time interactive playback, as it's called. So have fun with the waves and with getting started with Boss. Bye bye.